Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of April of 2023. Today we have some updates, so let's start. And before we start, I would like to remind you that today is Easter, according to Orthodox calendar, and of course most of the Ukrainians and most of the Russians celebrate this holiday. And for example, we discussed many times in the previous videos that according to my understanding and my projections, there are going to be some kind of ceasefire period during this weekend. The Russians didn't announce anything like that. The Ukrainians didn't announce or confirm anything like that as well. But we can see that the numbers that we receive from the front lines, the picture, the video confirmation, the progress and so on, tell us that there is some kind of ceasefire period. Of course, this ceasefire period was broken by the Ukrainians in Donetsk, and we will discuss this a little bit later. But when talking, for example, Artyomovsk, there is some kind of ceasefire period, and a lot of things are saying about this. First of all, for example, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 145 soldiers, 9 armored vehicles, and 4 artillery systems. As you can see, the level of losses of Ukrainians on Donetsk front line in the vicinity of Artyomovsk is the lowest maybe since the beginning of March or something like this. For example, yesterday the Ukrainians lost, according to that report, 350 soldiers, the day before yesterday 340, and on the 13th of April the Ukrainians lost 300, and today they lost just 145. So we see that at least the activity of the Russian soldiers and the Ukrainian soldiers was reduced at least in 2 times or something like this. Furthermore, today we received another piece of information that the Wagner's released under control and under command, under responsibility of the head of Wagner's Prigozhin, 130 Ukrainian soldiers was released from the Russian prison, and there was some kind of prisoner exchange process, and as you can see, that process took place between Zaliznyantskaya and, let's say, Privolia. In this area there was a video published by the Russians, so as you can see there's like convoys and columns of Ukrainians and the Russian soldiers. But when talking about the number of Russians that were released, there are no such a number. I believe that we're going to receive this number later from the Ministry of Defense. But anyway, we need to understand that if that prisoner exchange process took place in the vicinity of Artyomovsk, we need to understand that there could be no battles in this area, no artillery duels, because everything is it's a very difficult and complicated process to make some kind of prisoner exchange, and you need to be sure that your enemy is not going to start attacking. You need to confirm this situation from both sides. So one more time, there were no ceasefire period according to the official announcements or something like this, but there is some kind of such a process, silent process on the ground, and the facts and the numbers are saying confirms this situation. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to establish control over more 2 blocks in the western part of Bakhmut. They haven't provided the real blocks where exactly, but they were just adding that some block on the northwest part and the southwest part were taken by the Russians. Furthermore, they added that Ukrainians made another counter-offensive operation of the 77th Air Mobile Brigade in the vicinity of this small area on the north, but that attack was repulsed. The Ukrainians were defeated. Very interesting updates are coming from, let's say, this area as well. The Russians, not the Russians, but today, I believe that you were able to saw video confirmation that 93rd Brigade, some groups of 93rd Brigade, 3rd Battalion of that brigade published a video that about the situation in this area. You know, like Ukrainians, when the situation is very bad, when the situation is very critical, the parts and forces that located on this or that front line where the situation is very bad are trying to make a video, trying to ask for help of their relatives, of their friends, of anybody who can help them and to get them out of this hell. And recently, I believe that this video was published today, but I believe that this video dated a few days ago, or maybe even today. But they published that they were asking for help and that they were refusing to continue or to follow any Ukrainian orders. They're saying that they were asked, not they were ordered, but they were asked to move to this or that unknown position under any support in the vicinity of Bakhmut, and that forces refused to follow the order or to follow the request because of absence of any support from artillery, from any kind of other forces. So that forces were captured, they were moved from Bakhmut, and they were disarmed, and for now it's unknown what is the destiny of that brigade. But if we take a look at deployment map, we're going to see that this 93rd Brigade, according to this map, is located right in front of the line of combat line, in the vicinity of the railroad station. This is a very bad piece of news, because every time when some parts are doing like this, the next few days we're going to see the collapse of this front line of this area, and the Russians continue advancing. As we discussed, I believe that tomorrow, when we're going to see another report of Ministry of Defense, we're going to see the same level of activity, because like tomorrow they will provide us information for the Sunday, for today. There are going to be not much activity, and after that, and I believe tomorrow, at least I expect tomorrow, the final Russian push in this direction and the entire collapse of Bakhmut. I believe and I expect that within 2 weeks the entire Bakhmut is going to fall, and Artyomovsk is going to rise. Now let's go to the front lines and let's discuss the situation on the ground. The Russians reported, let's start with the Kupyansk. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours they managed to break another rotation process on this bank of Oskol River in the vicinity of Dvorechina and Granikovka. The Ukrainians who located on this side of the river are stuck in this forest line. They can't rotate, they can't move their forces back to Dvorechina yet and to get fresh forces. I believe that the Russians established fire control over the river and over the bridges, pontoon bridges. I believe that this situation is going to be collapsed very soon, and the Russians will be able to take entire bridgehead. Furthermore, the Russians report about destroyed D-20 howitzers, and many other losses from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians lost 35 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. The same situation we can find in the vicinity of Stelmakhovka. This and in the vicinity of Novoselovska. This is a very important area for the Russians, because Stelmakhovka is the head town of Zherebets River. So there is Zherebets River that goes along from the Seversk and Donetsk, along this area, and Stelmakhovka is the head town of this river. And the Russians are saying that they also blocked Ukrainian forces in that town, and the Ukrainians were trying to make another rotation process. As we discussed, the distance between along fields with the Ukrainian positions along the Oskol River is very big, and the Ukrainians can't complete or make a normal rotation process, and they were attacked by the artillery, and they couldn't evacuate their wounded soldiers to bring more forces, ammo, and so on. As you can see, there is some activity in the vicinity of Liman area. The Russians continue attacking the Ukrainians in the fields between between Zherebets River and the Russian position in Kremina, between Kremina and Svatova. The Russians attack the Ukrainians with artillery, with drones, with tanks, with any type of weapon they have. The Ukrainians trying to defend themselves, trying not to allow the Russians to develop their progress, and so on. And as a result of those clashes all over the front lines, the Ukraine lost 80 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system D-30. More and more updates are coming from Seversk front line. We know that there are heavy clashes in the vicinity of Bilogorovka. The Russians are trying to establish control over this town. And for example, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were attacking supply and support roads of Ukrainian forces in Bilogorovka. As we know, there is a very bad rainy weather, and the Ukrainians can use just few roads that connect Seversk, Serebryanka, Grigorievka, Bilogorovka. And this is the only road they can use for supporting that forces that currently located on the hills of Bilogorovka hills. And the Russians were attacking these roads and so on. We haven't received any numbers of Ukrainian losses, just like a fact that took place during the previous 24 hours. Another interesting updates are coming from the north of Soledar front line. The Ukrainians made, we can say, it one of the first counter-offensive operation in direction of Sakha City, trying to unblock maybe the road between Seversk forces and Slimansk forces using the road through Vasikovka-Bandarna. But the Russians are saying that that attack was repulsed. That attack was made by the 54th Brigade of Armed Forces of Ukraine. That attack was repulsed, and Sakha and City is a very important bridgehead. We know that this area is under Wagner control since February. And this control of this bridgehead allowed the Russians to break the connection line between Vasikovka and Seversk front line. When talking about Artyomovsk, there is another piece of news from this area. We would like to continue the topic about the secret climate weapon from the Russian side. For example, today we gave another update from the same source about the secret climate weapon. Zelensky, on that meeting, he didn't believe, of course, the head of Ukrainian defense armies, Artyomovsk, about any type of climate weapon. He's not agree with this. So he requested this general to start unblocking operation, but this commander Syrsky provided like statistic number for the last, I believe, 5 or 10 years about the weather in this area. And when talking about the numbers, when talking about the facts, yes, he was right. The head of defense army defense operation of Artyomovsk, Syrsky, this year is the only year with such a bad weather since maybe for the last 10 years. There were no such rainy days as we can find this year exactly in this area. So this is his understanding of the situation. This is what he was trying to maybe to explain and to give understanding to Zelensky that it's impossible to start any at least successful counter-offensive and blocking operation in this area. Now let's go further to Donbass, to Donetsk. The Russians are saying that as a result of artillery duels, they managed to attack the positions of foreign legion in the vicinity of Archertina. If we try to increase the number of days from this area, as you can see, for example, for 1 week, we see that the Russians activated in this area very much. They're attacking the positions on these fortifications through Archertina to Kalinovo, Arkhangelsk, these towns, and we see that the Russians are concentrated currently in this area. Furthermore, the Russians reported that since the beginning, during the previous days, the level of Ukrainian soldiers who surrenders significantly increased. So more and more Ukrainians try to surrender. We see that this is some kind of trend. The Ukrainians took a decision not to fight, and when they arrive to the front line, they try to surrender at least when talking about Avdiivka area. Furthermore, one more time, during the previous night, during the Easter events that took place in the central church in Donetsk, this capital of DPR. So this is, for example, the church, this one. I believe you can recognize the church. And during the night, the Ukrainians launched 2 missiles of Grad, and as a result of that attack, 1 civilian was killed and 6 civilians were wounded, including one monk from that church. So this terrible situation, the attack was done at 4 a.m. of the local time. When talking about Uglidar, the Russians are saying that they managed to stop one commandos group. They managed to there were some video of photo confirmation of more attacks in direction of the towns along the front line, along combat line. The Russians were trying to attack warehouses, fuel depots, and so on. And when talking about this entire area, South Donetsk and Zaporozhye, the Ukrainians lost 49 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems. Furthermore, the Ukrainians lost 1 Raider INT-PQ-37. So also the Russian published video of attack of flamethrower systems in direction of Malinovka. So we can say that there are very heavy artillery duels. The Russians report about destroying of 1 headquarters of 102nd Brigade, and the same situation in Kherson. As you can see, there are no even icons above this territory. Just as a result of some duels, clashes, the Ukrainians lost 30 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.